Welcome to Unit 3, Part 1. In the previous units, we focused on climate change causes and impacts. In this unit, we're focusing on exploring solutions to climate change, starting with Part 1, a global problem. We'll introduce carbon footprint and why some countries or individuals have such a large footprint, and what the response has been on the international level. Let's get started. Let's start off by defining the term ecological footprint. An ecological footprint is a measure of the demands made by a person or group of people on global natural resources, including land and water use, as well as the waste that is generated. Earth Overshoot Day marks the date when humans have used all of the biological resources the Earth can regenerate in that year. In 2020, Earth's Overshoot Day fell on Saturday, August 22nd. That is the day humans used all of the resources that Earth is able to generate that year. As you can imagine, the different lifestyles countries live will impact an ecological footprint and overshoot day. We'll explore this concept further in one of the activities. A carbon footprint also deals with resources, but focuses on the greenhouse gases. A carbon footprint also deals with resource usage, but focuses on the greenhouse gases related to burning of fossil fuels, like CO2, which we've primarily focused on. Everything has a carbon footprint, from services like travel to the electronics you use and food you eat. But calculating your carbon footprint can be difficult, sometimes impossible, since you consider a number of factors like extraction, production, distribution, and wastage. But a rough calculation can still give us an idea of which things are worse emitters of fossil fuels. Take, for example, food. You have the different stages from production, processing, transporting, and waste, all of which require resources or energy. Meat, specifically beef, produces high emissions, almost 13 times that of vegetable protein, such as beans and tofu. The good news is, because some foods have a lower carbon footprint than others, eating more of a plant-based diet can reduce your carbon footprint. Now that we have a better understanding of carbon footprint, let's look at what industries and activities are the biggest emitters and where do we stand. The primary sources of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States are transportation, by far one of the largest sector. Greenhouse gas emissions come from burning fossil fuels for cars, trucks, ships, trains, and planes. Petroleum is primarily used in the United States. Electricity production, according to the U.S. the Environmental Protection Agency, 63% of our electricity comes from burning fossil fuels, mostly coal and natural gas. Industry, or the burning of fossil fuel for energy and producing goods and raw materials, and the rest is commercial and residential, agriculture, and land use and forestry. As you might have guessed, the U.S. ranks high in total carbon emissions. On an individual level, Americans rank high in greenhouse gas emissions. From transportation to a higher consumption of resources, if everyone lived like the Americans, we would require more than 4 planet Earths. In comparison, other countries that consume less on an individual level have much lower ecological footprints. But some countries like China and India, although have a lower individual carbon footprint or per capita, overall rank high due to the growing population and reliance on coal and other fossil fuels. China is one of the highest global carbon emitters due to the production of goods and reliance on fossil fuels. While we can all work to lower an individual footprint, while we can all work to lower our individual footprints, decisions made at the government level also affect our individual carbon emissions, such as whether our town's electric grid runs from fossil fuels or renewable energy, or whether we have access to reliable public transportation. For example, let's say I have an electric car that does not burn gasoline, but when I plug it into charge, the electricity used to charge it was produced by the power plant in my town that burns fossil fuels. So unless I have enough solar panels on my house to charge my phone, So unless I have enough solar panels on my house, to charge my car, I'm stuck using fossil fuels to power my car, and it's no longer truly a zero. So unless I have solar panels on my house to charge my car, I'm stuck using fossil fuels to power my car, and it's no longer truly a zero. So unless I have enough solar panels on my house to charge my car, I'm stuck using fossil fuels to power my car, and it's no longer a truly zero-emission vehicle. This is partially true on Maui, where the majority of our electric grid is still powered by burning fossil fuels at the main power plants in Kahului and Ma'alaya. However, Hawaii does have an ambitious goal to transition to 100% renewables by 2045. Now that we know how some countries are the biggest greenhouse gas emitters, why is this a global problem? Greenhouse gases emitted into the atmosphere don't stay in one place, and the impacts are often affecting other nations that least contribute to greenhouse gas emissions, like islands in the South Pacific facing the threat of sea level rise. So what has been the response? In 2015, 195 countries agreed in Paris to set individual targets for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, with the shared goal of limiting the rise in average global temperatures to less than 2 degrees Celsius. Countries each set their targets to meet. According to the Climate Action Tracker, some countries like China and India have the most ambitious goals. This is not only because they are some of the leading contributors to greenhouse gas emissions, but also because burning fossil fuels is causing severe air pollution and health impacts in those countries. As you will learn more in this unit, burning fossil fuels also releases other chemicals and particulates into the air, which can combine to create smog and have negative impacts on human health. In countries like India and China, smog and particulate levels can be so bad that you cannot see clearly across the street. And residents use apps to monitor air quality to determine if they can go outside and which activities are safe that day. For the United States, the Trump administration made the decision to withdraw from the Paris Agreement, but the Biden administration has committed to rejoining the Paris Agreement this year in hopes of getting the United States back on track in addressing climate change. The good news is that by working on climate solutions, we can solve other social, environmental, and economic problems. The extracting and burning of fossil fuels also causes a lot of injustice due to health impacts and working conditions. And air pollution poses the greatest environmental threat to global health, according to the World Health Organization. Therefore, moving away from fossil fuels as an energy source will help address climate change and air pollution at the same time, improving the lives of millions of people around the world. In 2015, the framework to achieve these global goals were developed by the United Nations, known as the Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 interlinked global goals designed to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. Goals like no poverty and quality education all work towards prosperity for all and protecting the planet. In this unit, we will learn more about carbon footprints, air pollution, the Paris Climate Agreement, and the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. Let's look more specifically at the activities. In the first activity, Ecological Footprint Calculator, you will take the Carbon Footprint Calculator survey to calculate how many Earths are needed to support your lifestyle, and take a closer look at ecological footprints for different countries and how they compare. The second activity, you'll focus on the pollutants in the air, resulting in poor air quality, and the negative impacts on human health. The third activity will focus on the Paris Agreement and how countries are doing in reaching their targets. The last activity will focus on Sustainable Development Goals, and you'll select 2 goals to analyze and complete a Google form activity. Wrap up the unit. You wrap up this part by completing Part 1 quiz.